The moment my parents canceled my 18th birthday party because my 15-year-old sister Madison threw a tantrum, I knew something inside me had permanently broken. We were sitting around our dinner table in our comfortable suburban Columbus home, and I had just finished excitedly telling them about the final head count for my party at the country club. 53 friends confirmed, the custom cake ordered, everything perfectly planned. Then Madison suddenly burst into tears, screaming that it was unfair she would not get anything special when she turned 16 in 8 months. She threatened to hurt herself if the party happened. Without even looking at me, my parents immediately canceled everything to appease her. That night, as I lay in bed listening to them comfort her through the walls, I made a decision that would change everything. Growing up in our 4-bedroom house on Maple Street had always felt like living in a carefully constructed movie set. My father David worked as a regional manager for a major insurance company, pulling in a solid 6-figure salary that afforded us membership at the Columbus Country Club and annual family vacations to places like Myrtle Beach and the Great Smoky Mountains. My mother Linda worked part-time as a dental hygienist, which gave her the flexibility to attend every single one of Madison's activities while somehow missing most of mine. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. Every Christmas, our holiday cards featured us in matching sweaters, standing in front of our brick colonial home. We attended First Methodist Church every Sunday, where my parents served on various committees and Madison sang in the youth choir when she felt like it. During neighborhood barbecues, other families would comment on how well-behaved and accomplished we seemed. The cracks in this facade had been showing for years, but I was usually too busy working or studying to dwell on them. Madison had been diagnosed with mild anxiety when she was 12, which somehow became a free pass for every tantrum, every broken promise, and every disrupted family plan. When she threw her iPhone against the wall during an argument about curfew, she got a brand new one the next week. When she decided she did not want to attend my track meet because it was boring, my parents skipped it too, saying family unity was more important than individual achievements. I had been working part-time at Sullivan's Auto Parts since I turned 16, saving every dollar I could for college and my future. The work was honest and straightforward, helping customers find the right parts for their cars, and learning about engines and mechanical systems from Jerry, the store manager who had become something of a mentor to me. While other kids my age were hanging out at the mall or playing video games, I was building a work ethic and a savings account that had grown to over $3,000. My acceptance to Ohio State University had been one of the proudest moments of my life. The partial academic scholarship I had earned would cover about 60% of my tuition, and I had planned to work my way through the rest. I wanted to study business, maybe follow in my father's footsteps in the corporate world, or perhaps start my own company someday. The future had seemed bright and full of possibility. When my 18th birthday began approaching, I had allowed myself to get genuinely excited about the celebration. This was supposed to be a major milestone, the transition from childhood to adulthood, and my parents had initially seemed enthusiastic about marking the occasion properly. I had even contributed $500 of my own hard-earned money to help pay for the country club venue and catering. My girlfriend Sarah, who I had been dating for almost 2 years, had helped me plan every detail, from the playlist to the decorations. The guest list included friends from school, teammates from the track team where I ran middle-distance events, a few coworkers from Sullivan's Auto Parts, and some extended family members. Sarah had designed clever invitations on her computer, and we had spent hours discussing whether to have a DJ or just use a playlist. My mother had seemed genuinely invested, ordering a custom sheet cake from the bakery downtown that specialized in celebration cakes. My father had used his connections at the country club to secure a perfect date and had even arranged for the outdoor pavilion overlooking the golf course. But all of that planning and excitement came crashing down during what should have been a routine family dinner 3 days before my birthday. We were eating my mother's meatloaf and mashed potatoes, discussing final details for the party, when Madison suddenly put down her fork and started crying. Not the gentle tears of someone who was sad, but the loud, dramatic sobbing that had become her signature move whenever she wanted attention or her way. She declared through her tears that the whole party was completely unfair because she would not have anything special to look forward to for 8 whole months, until her 16th birthday. She claimed that I always got everything while she got nothing, which was so far from reality that I actually laughed out loud. That was apparently the wrong response, because her crying intensified into full-blown hysteria. She started talking about how unloved and ignored she felt, how I was obviously the favorite child, and how she might as well hurt herself since nobody cared about her feelings. The transformation in my parents was immediate and complete. They rushed to her side, completely abandoning their dinner and me, surrounding her with comfort and reassurance. My father stroked her hair while my mother held her hands, both of them speaking in soothing tones about how much they loved her and how important her feelings were to the family. I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, watching the final preparations for my 18th birthday party get tossed aside like yesterday's newspaper. The worst part was not even the cancellation itself, but how quickly and easily my parents dismissed 18 years of my life to appease one of Madison's emotional outbursts. When I tried to speak up, to point out that invitations had already been sent and deposits paid, my mother waved her hand at me like I was being unreasonably dramatic. When I mentioned that I had contributed $500 of my own money that I had earned through months of weekend shifts at Sullivan's Auto Parts, my father suggested we could do something smaller and more intimate later. I knew with absolute certainty that later would never come. This was not the first time my parents had made promises to reschedule something they had canceled for Madison's sake. My 8th grade graduation ceremony had been skipped because Madison had soccer tryouts that same afternoon. The college visit trip that was supposed to introduce me to campus life got canceled when Madison decided she wanted to visit her friend in Cincinnati instead. Christmas mornings had become entirely focused on Madison's reactions to her gifts, with mine opened as an afterthought while she played with her new toys. I excused myself from the dinner table and went up to my room, closing the door behind me and trying to process what had just happened. The walls of my bedroom were covered with track ribbons, academic achievement certificates, and photos with Sarah and my friends. This room had been my sanctuary for most of my teenage years, but suddenly it felt like a prison cell. I could hear my parents continuing to comfort Madison downstairs, their voices carrying up through the heating vents, as they assured her that she was loved and that her feelings mattered more than any party. Sarah answered her phone on the second ring, and when I told her what had happened, the silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight with anger on my behalf. She had spent weeks helping me plan every detail, had bought a new dress specifically for the occasion, and had been looking forward to celebrating this milestone with me almost as much as I was. Her reaction validated what I was feeling, that this was not normal family conflict resolution but something much deeper and more troubling. That night, while my parents continued their crisis management session with Madison in the living room, I sat at my desk with my laptop and started researching apartment rentals near the Ohio State campus. I was not looking out of spite or anger, but out of a cold, clear recognition that I needed to take control of my own life. If my 18th birthday was not worth celebrating in my family's opinion, then maybe it was time to embrace what turning 18 actually meant in legal and practical terms. The apartment listings revealed options I had never seriously considered before. Studio apartments near campus ranged from $400 to $700 per month, which was definitely manageable with my current income and savings. I found one listing that particularly caught my attention, a small studio in a converted house just 6 blocks from campus, and along a bus route that would get me to Sullivan's Auto Parts in less than 20 minutes. The landlord was advertising immediate availability, and the photos showed a clean, simple space with a Murphy bed, a small kitchenette, and a bathroom that, while tiny, appeared to be recently updated. I spent the next 2 hours filling out the online application, providing references from Jerry at Sullivan's Auto Parts and from my calculus teacher who had known me for 3 years. My bank statements showed steady deposits from my job and a savings balance that demonstrated financial responsibility. By 11:30 that night, I had submitted everything and paid the $25 application fee with my debit card. The house had finally gone quiet downstairs. My parents had presumably succeeded in convincing Madison that she was the center of the universe, and that my birthday party would no longer threaten her position as the family's primary concern. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the times I had accepted being overlooked, minimized, or sacrificed for the sake of keeping Madison happy. It was not just the big things like the canceled party, but hundreds of small moments that had accumulated over the years like sediment in a riverbed. The next morning brought the cruelest twist yet. I woke up to find Madison in the kitchen wearing a brand new outfit that I recognized as expensive items from the mall's designer stores. When I asked her where she had gotten the money for clothes that probably cost more than I made in a week at Sullivan's Auto Parts, she smiled and told me that our parents had given her $500 as a thank you gift for being so understanding about the party situation. My $500. The money I had earned through weekend shifts and summer overtime, money I had contributed in good faith to my own birthday celebration, had been handed over to Madison as a reward for destroying that celebration. I did not scream or throw things or demand explanations. I simply walked back upstairs, pulled out my phone, and called the landlord who had listed the studio apartment. He answered on the third ring and told me my application had been approved that morning. I could move in immediately if I could provide first month's rent and security deposit in cash. I told him I would be there that afternoon. My 18th birthday arrived on a Tuesday with all the fanfare of a dentist appointment. My parents, perhaps feeling some residual guilt about the party situation, presented me with a $50 gift card to Target and a promise that we would celebrate properly later when things settled down. Madison got more attention that day than I did, with my parents constantly checking on how she was feeling and reassuring her that canceling the party had been the right decision for family harmony. I spent most of my birthday working a double shift at Sullivan's Auto Parts. Jerry, who had figured out it was my birthday from the employee information sheet, surprised me with a small cupcake from the grocery store bakery and a $100 cash bonus that he said I had more than earned through my dedication and reliability. It was more genuine celebration than I received at home, and Jerry's gruff but sincere congratulations meant more to me than any forced family dinner could have. Sarah picked me up after work and took me to dinner at the local Applebee's, where we shared loaded potato skins and talked about our plans for college. She was heading to Ohio State too, planning to study education, and we had talked about getting an apartment together once we were both settled on campus. That conversation took on new meaning given what I was planning, but I decided to wait until after I had moved out to discuss the details with her. This was something I needed to do on my own first, to prove to myself that I could be independent before I started making plans that involved other people. The next morning, Saturday, provided the perfect opportunity. My parents had scheduled an appointment with Madison's therapist, a weekly ritual that had become as routine as grocery shopping and church attendance. They would be gone for at least 2 hours, giving me plenty of time to pack my essential belongings and load them into my 13-year-old Honda Civic. I had been mentally cataloging what I needed to take for several days, focusing on practical items rather than sentimental ones. I packed quickly and efficiently, filling garbage bags with clothes, toiletries, school supplies, and the few electronic devices I owned. My track trophies and academic awards stayed on the shelves where they had gathered dust for months, unnoticed by parents who were too busy managing Madison's emotional crises to acknowledge their other child's achievements. I took my laptop, my work clothes for Sullivan's Auto Parts, and enough casual clothing to last a couple of weeks. Everything fit easily into my car, with room to spare. The hardest part was writing the letter. I sat at my desk for almost 30 minutes, trying to find words that would explain my decision without sounding angry or accusatory. I wanted my parents to understand that this was not an act of rebellion or revenge, but a natural step toward independence that should have been supported rather than forced. I wrote about my acceptance to Ohio State, my job at Sullivan's Auto Parts, and my ability to support myself financially. I emphasized that I was not running away from problems, but moving toward opportunities, and that I hoped we could maintain a relationship based on mutual respect rather than the dysfunctional patterns that had developed over the years. The apartment was even smaller than I had expected, but it felt like a palace compared to the emotional claustrophobia I had been living with at home. The Murphy bed folded down to reveal a surprisingly comfortable mattress, and the kitchenette had everything I needed to prepare simple meals. The bathroom was tiny but clean, with decent water pressure and plenty of hot water. Most importantly, it was mine. For the first time in my life, I had a space where I could make decisions without worrying about how they would affect Madison's emotional state or my parents' stress levels. I spent the rest of Saturday getting settled, changing my address with the bank, my employer, the university, and the phone company. Each official form I filled out felt like another step toward genuine independence. I bought basic groceries and cleaning supplies, enjoying the simple freedom of choosing what to eat without navigating family preferences and dietary restrictions that seemed to change based on Madison's moods. My phone started ringing around 4 in the afternoon, when my parents presumably returned home and discovered my absence. I let the calls go to voicemail for the first few hours, wanting to give them time to read my letter and process the situation before engaging in what was sure to be an emotional conversation. The voicemails progressed from confusion to anger to panic, with Madison's voice occasionally audible in the background, alternately claiming it was all her fault and insisting that I was being completely unreasonable. When I finally called them back on Sunday evening, my mother answered the phone in tears. She immediately began pleading with me to come home, saying they could work everything out and that the family was not complete without me. My father got on the phone and took a more authoritative approach, insisting that I was making a mistake and that 18 was too young to live independently. Neither of them seemed interested in discussing why I had felt the need to leave, or what changes might make it possible for me to return. I kept my voice calm and steady, explaining that I was not angry, but that I needed to establish my independence in a healthy way. I assured them that I was safe, financially stable, and committed to continuing my education and my job. I offered to meet them for dinner in a neutral location to discuss our relationship going forward, but I made it clear that I would not be moving back home unless some fundamental changes occurred in how our family operated. The conversation ended with more tears from my mother and threats from my father about cutting off support for college, which was particularly hollow since I was already paying most of my own expenses and had never relied on them for significant financial help. Madison grabbed the phone at the end to sob about how sorry she was and how she had never meant for this to happen, but her apology felt more like another performance designed to make herself the center of attention rather than a genuine acknowledgement of how her behavior had affected others. But the worst revelation came 3 days later, when I ran into Mrs. Patterson from our church at the grocery store. She approached me with a concerned expression and asked how I was feeling, saying she had heard from my parents that I had run away due to mental health issues and was getting professional help. The lie was so blatant and so calculated that I felt physically sick. Rather than admit they had canceled my birthday party for my sister's tantrum, my parents had told everyone in our social circle that I was emotionally unstable and had disappeared because I could not handle normal family life. Living on my own turned out to be far less difficult than my parents had predicted and far more rewarding than I had even hoped. The studio apartment quickly became a comfortable home as I learned to manage my own schedule, budget, and daily routines without the constant drama that had characterized life with Madison. I discovered that I actually enjoyed cooking simple meals, doing my own laundry, and maintaining a clean, organized living space. Without the stress of walking on eggshells around my sister's unpredictable emotional outbursts, I found myself sleeping better and feeling more energetic than I had in years. My relationship with Sarah deepened as she witnessed my growing confidence and independence. She spent most weekends at my apartment, and we developed comfortable routines around studying together, exploring Columbus, and planning our future. She had initially been worried about how I would handle living alone, but as weeks passed, she began commenting on how much calmer and happier I seemed. We could have conversations without interruption, watch movies without worrying about disturbing someone else, and make plans without having to check with parents who might cancel everything at the last minute to accommodate Madison's latest crisis. To supplement my income, I picked up weekend shifts at a different auto parts store across town, giving me additional work experience and increasing my monthly earnings by about $300. Jerry at Sullivan's Auto Parts had been supportive of my decision to move out, saying he had wondered when I would finally stand up for myself. He had watched my parents miss multiple employee appreciation events over the years, always with last-minute excuses about family emergencies that seemed to revolve around Madison's needs. When college classes started 3 weeks after I moved out, I threw myself into my studies with an enthusiasm that surprised even me. Without the constant background stress of family conflict, I was able to concentrate fully on my coursework. My business classes were challenging but engaging, and I particularly enjoyed the economics and accounting courses that connected directly to my real-world experience, managing my own finances. My professors noticed my work ethic and maturity, and several commented that I seemed more focused than many students who were living in dormitories with fewer real-world responsibilities. I made friends easily with other students who worked part-time to support themselves, finding common ground with young people who understood the value of hard work and financial independence. Many of them came from families where college was a privilege to be earned rather than an automatic entitlement, and our conversations about balancing work and school were refreshing compared to the entitled attitudes I sometimes encountered from students whose parents paid for everything. Meanwhile, the reports I was getting about life at home painted a picture of escalating dysfunction. Madison's behavior had apparently gotten much worse without me there, to serve as a target for her frustrations or a scapegoat for family problems. She was failing 3 classes, staying out past her curfew regularly, and had been caught vaping in the school bathroom twice. My parents called me weekly, usually in tears, begging me to come home because Madison needed her big brother to help stabilize the family situation. I offered to take Madison to lunch occasionally, thinking that a one-on-one relationship outside the family dynamic might be beneficial for both of us, but she angrily refused, saying she was too ashamed to face me. According to my mother, Madison blamed herself for driving me away, but was also furious that I had abandoned the family during a difficult time. This contradiction seemed typical of her approach to taking responsibility, acknowledging fault, while simultaneously being angry at others for the consequences of her behavior. My mother had started having anxiety attacks that required medical attention, and my father was drinking more heavily in the evenings, though they tried to hide both problems from their social circle. The stress of managing Madison's increasingly destructive behavior without a second child to absorb some of the chaos was apparently more than they had anticipated. Church friends and neighbors were starting to notice that something was wrong with the family's perfect image, though my parents were still maintaining the fiction that I had left due to mental health problems rather than their own parenting failures. The extended family was another matter entirely. My aunts and uncles had begun asking pointed questions about my absence from family gatherings, and some of them had reached out to me directly through social media to get my side of the story. When I explained the real reason for my departure, several family members expressed shock at how I had been treated and admiration for my mature response to an impossible situation. The breakthrough came when my grandmother Patricia, my father's mother, called me on a Thursday evening in October. She was 82 years old but still sharp as a tack, and she had apparently been conducting her own investigation into my sudden departure from the family home. She had spoken with several family members, pieced together the real story from their various accounts, and was calling to tell me that she was proud of my strength and independence. But what she told me next changed everything. She revealed that she had known for years about the favoritism and dysfunction in our household, but had been afraid to interfere because my parents had threatened to limit her access to grandchildren if she criticized their parenting. She had watched them enable Madison's increasingly destructive behavior while taking me for granted, and she had been waiting for someone to finally stand up to the pattern. She was not only proud of my decision to leave, but wanted to help support my independence by contributing to my college expenses. More importantly, she had been quietly setting the record straight with other family members about the real reason for my departure. At a recent family gathering that I had not attended, she had confronted my parents directly about their lies regarding my mental health, and had told everyone present the truth about the canceled birthday party and the pattern of favoritism that had led to my decision to move out. The reaction from aunts, uncles, and cousins had been uniformly supportive of me and critical of my parents' handling of the situation. Grandmother Patricia became a regular presence in my new life, visiting my apartment every couple of weeks with home-cooked meals and genuine interest in my progress at school and work. Through her, I learned the full extent of how badly things were deteriorating at home. Madison had been suspended from school for 3 days after getting into a physical fight with another student, and the incident had required my parents to meet with school administrators, counselors, and potentially face legal action if the other student's parents decided to press charges. The marriage between my parents was showing serious strain as they disagreed about how to handle Madison's escalating problems. My mother wanted to find her a new therapist and possibly consider medication, while my father insisted that stricter discipline and consequences were needed. Their arguments were loud enough that neighbors had begun complaining, and Mrs. Patterson from church had asked my grandmother if everything was all right with the family. My mother had quit her part-time job at the dental office, claiming she needed to be home more to supervise Madison, but the loss of income was creating additional financial pressure. My father's work performance was declining due to the stress and distraction of constant family crises, and he had already missed several important client meetings because of calls from school or police about Madison's behavior. His supervisor had apparently spoken with him about the need to keep personal problems from affecting his professional responsibilities. Extended family members were no longer accepting my parents' version of events. After my grandmother's revelation at the family gathering, several aunts and uncles had reached out to me directly through phone calls and social media messages. My uncle Robert, who had always been close to my father, told me he was disgusted by how I had been treated and wanted to maintain a relationship with me regardless of the family drama. My Aunt Jennifer invited me to her family's Thanksgiving celebration, saying I would always be welcome in her home, even if my parents continued their destructive patterns. I maintained my boundaries while accepting support and connection from family members who had shown they cared about my well-being. My grades remained excellent. I had been promoted to assistant manager at Sullivan's Auto Parts, and my relationship with Sarah continued to strengthen as we made plans for our shared future. I was attending a different church with Sarah's family, where I found acceptance and peace without the complicated social dynamics that had made my family's church uncomfortable. Meanwhile, my parents were making increasingly desperate attempts to force me back into their dysfunctional system. They showed up at Sullivan's Auto Parts twice, causing such a scene that Jerry had to ask them to leave and threatened to call security if they returned. They contacted the University Financial Aid Office, trying to get information about my student status and attempting to interfere with my academic progress. They even called my landlord, claiming I was mentally unstable and should not be living independently, but he had refused to discuss my tenancy with anyone other than me. I documented all of these harassment attempts, keeping detailed records of dates, times, and witnesses in case I needed to pursue legal action. The pattern of behavior suggested that my parents were more interested in controlling me than supporting me, and their tactics were becoming increasingly inappropriate and potentially illegal. Sarah's parents had begun treating me like a member of their family, inviting me to family dinners and including me in their holiday plans. Mr. Johnson, Sarah's father, was a high school principal who had seen many young people struggle with difficult family situations, and he had assured me that my response to my circumstances showed remarkable maturity and strength. Mrs. Johnson, a nurse, had offered practical support with everything from finding a good doctor for routine health care to advice about managing my finances as an independent adult. The crisis that finally broke everything came on a Tuesday night in November when Madison was arrested for drunk driving. She had taken my father's car without permission, crashed through a neighbor's fence, and was found by police passed out behind the wheel with a blood alcohol level that was nearly twice the legal limit for adults, let alone someone who was only 15 years old. The neighbor's fence was completely destroyed, and there was significant damage to the car's front end. My parents called me at 11:30 that night, both of them sobbing hysterically into the phone. They begged me to help with bail money and legal fees, saying they had already spent most of their savings on therapy for Madison and could not afford the lawyer she would need to avoid serious legal consequences. The irony was overwhelming. They were asking me to solve with my hard-earned money the same problems they had created by enabling Madison's behavior and ignoring the warning signs that had been obvious for years. I listened to their pleas calmly, then told them I would not be providing any financial assistance for Madison's legal troubles. I suggested they sell some of the expensive clothing, electronics, and other items they had bought for her over the years, including the designer outfits she had purchased with my birthday party money. The silence on the other end of the phone lasted for almost a full minute before my father started yelling about family loyalty, and my mother began crying even harder. They threatened to cut me off from any future inheritance, to tell the extended family that I had refused to help during a crisis, and to make sure I understood that there would be no reconciliation if I did not step up during their time of need. I reminded them that I had never asked for or expected inheritance money, that the extended family already knew the truth about our situation, thanks to grandmother Patricia, and that reconciliation would require them to acknowledge their responsibility for the problems they had created, rather than expecting me to solve them with my money and energy. The conversation ended with my father hanging up on me, but the consequences of Madison's arrest continued to unfold in ways that forced my parents to confront the reality of their situation. Without the option of bailing her out immediately, Madison spent 3 days in juvenile detention while my parents scrambled to find legal representation they could afford. The experience was apparently terrifying for someone who had never faced real consequences for her actions, and according to my grandmother, Madison was a completely different person when she was finally released. The legal process moved forward with appropriate seriousness. Madison's driver's license was suspended immediately, and she faced charges that could result in significant fines, community service, mandatory counseling, and a permanent mark on her record that could affect her future educational and employment opportunities. For the first time in her life, her tears and tantrums had no power to make the problems go away. The juvenile court system was not interested in her anxiety diagnosis or her family's explanations about stress and acting out. My parents' marriage continued to deteriorate as the stress of dealing with real consequences finally overwhelmed their ability to maintain their perfect family facade. My father was angry that years of expensive therapy had apparently accomplished nothing, while my mother was devastated that her protective approach to parenting had failed so spectacularly. Their arguments became loud enough that several neighbors complained to the homeowners association about noise disturbances. The financial pressure was becoming severe. My mother's lost income, combined with legal fees for Madison's case and the cost of repairing the neighbor's fence, had exhausted their savings and forced them to consider borrowing against their home equity. My father's work situation became even more precarious when he had to take time off for court appearances and meetings with Madison's lawyer, causing him to miss a major client presentation that resulted in lost business for his company. Church attendance became sporadic, as my parents struggled with the shame of having their family problems become public knowledge. Several families in the congregation had teenage children, and the news of Madison's arrest had spread quickly through the community. My parents could no longer maintain the fiction that their family was a model of Christian values and proper child rearing, and the judgment from other families was apparently more than they could handle. Meanwhile, I continued to thrive in my independent life. My first semester of college ended with a 4.0 grade point average, earning me recognition on the dean's list and increased confidence in my academic abilities. Jerry at Sullivan's Auto Parts had given me additional responsibilities and another raise, recognizing my reliability and work ethic. Sarah and I had moved into a slightly larger apartment together, splitting the expenses and creating a stable, peaceful home environment that felt like everything my childhood home had never been. Grandmother Patricia helped me purchase a more reliable used car to replace my aging Honda Civic, and she continued to be a source of practical support and emotional encouragement. Through her, I learned that several extended family members were proud of my independence and had been quietly critical of my parents' handling of the situation for years. My success was serving as an example to younger cousins about the importance of developing self-reliance and standing up for their own needs rather than accepting dysfunction as normal. The most surprising development came in early December, when my parents showed up at my apartment, unannounced on Christmas Eve. I found them standing outside my door in the cold, carrying wrapped gifts and looking more humble and defeated than I had ever seen them. They asked if they could come in and talk, and for the first time since I had moved out, They seemed to be approaching me as an adult rather than a runaway child who needed to be controlled or manipulated back into line. They sat in my small living room and began what appeared to be a genuine attempt at apology. My mother acknowledged that they had been wrong to cancel my birthday party and that the pattern of favoring Madison had been unfair and damaging. My father admitted that their handling of Madison's problems had enabled her destructive behavior rather than teaching her responsibility and accountability. They both expressed regret about the lies they had told about my mental health and said they understood why I had felt the need to leave. But I noticed that Madison was not with them, and when I asked about her absence, they admitted she was spending Christmas at a friend's house because she said she could not face me. This suggested that while my parents were ready to begin the work of repairing our relationship, Madison was still not prepared to take genuine responsibility for her role in the family's problems. I listened to their apologies carefully, but I maintained firm boundaries about the conditions under which I would consider rebuilding a relationship with them. I explained that trust would need to be rebuilt slowly through consistent actions rather than emotional conversations, and that any future relationship would need to be based on mutual respect rather than attempts to control or manipulate my choices. I agreed to occasional family dinners at Grandmother Patricia's house as a neutral ground for working on our relationship, but I made it clear that I would not be moving back home or taking responsibility for fixing problems I had not created. The months that followed were marked by slow but genuine progress in healing our family relationships. My parents began attending counseling together, finally acknowledging that their parenting approach had created problems for both of their children rather than just for me. They learned about healthy boundary setting, the dangers of enabling destructive behavior, and the importance of treating each child as an individual rather than comparing them or sacrificing one for the other. Madison's journey toward accountability was more difficult and took longer. The legal consequences of her drunk driving arrest forced her to complete 200 hours of community service, attend mandatory alcohol education classes, and participate in regular counseling sessions with a therapist who specialized in adolescent behavioral problems. For the first time in her life, she was required to face the real-world consequences of her choices without the protective buffer of parents who would bail her out or make excuses for her behavior. The community service assignment turned out to be particularly valuable for Madison's personal growth. She was required to work at a local food bank, helping to sort donations and serve meals to families experiencing financial hardship. The experience exposed her to people who faced real problems without the safety net of middle-class privilege, and she began to develop empathy and perspective that had been missing from her previous worldview. 6 months after the arrest, Madison finally agreed to meet with me in the presence of a family therapist. The conversation was awkward and difficult, but it marked the beginning of an honest relationship between us. She admitted that she had been jealous of my maturity and independence for years, and that her tantrums and emotional outbursts had been attempts to maintain her position as the center of attention in our family. She apologized specifically for the birthday party incident and acknowledged that her behavior had driven me away from home. I forgave her, but I also explained that forgiveness did not automatically restore trust or erase consequences. I told her that I was proud of the progress she was making in taking responsibility for her choices, but that our relationship would need to be rebuilt gradually, based on her continued commitment to personal growth and accountability. She seemed to understand and accept this, which was itself a sign of significant maturity compared to her previous expectations that apologies should immediately restore everything to normal. My relationship with my parents evolved into something healthier but fundamentally different from what it had been during my childhood. They gradually learned to respect my independence and my right to make my own decisions, and I learned to appreciate their genuine efforts to change their approach to family relationships. We established regular family dinners at Grandmother Patricia's house, where the neutral environment helped us practice healthy communication and conflict resolution. Grandmother Patricia remained the central figure holding our extended family together, and her pride in my strength and independence served as an example to other family members about the importance of supporting young people's growth rather than enabling dysfunction. Several of my cousins reached out to me for advice about college planning, financial independence, and dealing with their own family challenges. My academic and professional success continued to build throughout my first year of college. I maintained my 4.0 grade point average, expanded my responsibilities at Sullivan's Auto Parts, and began exploring opportunities for internships in business and finance. Sarah and I strengthened our relationship as we supported each other through the challenges of college coursework and adult responsibilities. We talked seriously about our future together, including the possibility of marriage after graduation and our shared goals for building a stable, healthy family based on mutual respect and accountability. When Madison visited my apartment for the first time, almost a year after I had moved out, she was genuinely impressed by what Sarah and I had accomplished together. Our small but comfortable home was clean, organized, and peaceful in ways that contrasted sharply with the chaos that had characterized our family's house for most of our childhood. She commented that she had never realized how stressful it had been to live in an environment where every day brought the possibility of emotional explosions and family crises. My parents' efforts to rebuild trust were gradual but consistent. They stopped trying to control my choices and began treating me as an independent adult whose opinions and decisions deserved respect. They acknowledged that their previous approach to parenting had been harmful to both me and Madison, and they committed to learning healthier ways of supporting their children without enabling destructive behavior or playing favorites. The most important lesson I learned from this experience was that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to refuse to enable their dysfunction. By standing up for myself and walking away from toxic patterns, I forced everyone involved to confront problems they had been avoiding and begin the difficult work of real change. I discovered that respect must be earned through consistent actions rather than demanded through guilt, manipulation, or emotional blackmail. My quiet strength and firm boundaries ultimately saved my family by creating a crisis that could not be ignored or smoothed over with temporary fixes. The consequences of my departure forced my parents to face the reality of what their favoritism and enabling had created, and it motivated Madison to begin taking responsibility for her choices, rather than expecting others to solve her problems or absorb the consequences of her behavior. True family love, I learned, requires accountability, respect, and healthy boundaries, rather than blind loyalty to destructive patterns. The pain of setting those boundaries and enforcing them was significant, but it was temporary compared to the lasting damage that would have resulted from continuing to accept dysfunction as normal. By choosing independence and self-respect over the false peace of family harmony built on inequality and enabling, I created the foundation for genuine relationships based on mutual respect and personal responsibility. The transformation was not immediate or easy, but it was real and lasting. My family learned to function in healthier ways. Madison developed genuine accountability and empathy, and I established myself as an independent adult, capable of building the kind of life I wanted, rather than accepting whatever circumstances others created for me. The birthday party that was never celebrated became the catalyst for changes that were far more valuable than any single event could have been. As I reflect on this journey, I am grateful for the strength I found to stand up for myself when it mattered most. The decision to quietly move out and build my own life was the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was also the most important step toward becoming the person I was meant to be. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace in your family and standing up for yourself? How did you find the courage to set boundaries when the people you love were asking you to accept treatment you knew was wrong? I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more real-life stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Sharing this story might help someone else who is struggling with similar family dynamics realize they are not alone and that positive change is possible. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that you deserve respect and happiness, even when standing up for those things requires difficult choices.